you were not in a single phase. You had evolved past a like, I'm loving being single and going out and all
No, I
of
was
that
starting to
phase.
feel, I was actually starting to feel like it really wasn't enjoyable. Guys, before we get into the video, I wanted to let you know that on the 23rd of January, there is a big free event happening that I am hosting live called The First Principles for Getting to Commitment. We have thousands of people already signed up. This is your chance to join us too if you haven't already. If you want commitment this year and you're struggling out there in dating, or you're finding you keep coming across people who are casual or just keep you in limbo, who don't want the real thing, this is your chance to learn what you need to know to find it. It's going to be a really powerful event. You can join us for free by going to lovelifetraining.com. So head on over there now and we'll see you at that event. Now, let's get to the video. Welcome back to the Love Life podcast. Me, Matthew Hussey, and Audrey Wait, no, not Audrey Lestrade. Audrey Hussey.
Audrey what? Yeah, Audrey Hussey.
Wow, still getting it wrong.
Yes, first time we're recording the podcast where I'm Audrey Hussey.
It's the first time doing a married podcast.
Yeah, it was actually very weird changing my name.
Was it?
It was like I didn't anticipate it feeling so like momentous, you know, when we got to that place where we had to basically sign and decide whether or not I was keeping or changing my name. I had this moment of like, wait, but it's my name, it's my identity.
It's funny because I always said, you know, I always kind of maintained you should do what feels good to you.
For sure, yeah.
And if you want to keep your name, that's okay. But now that you have my name, it feels really nice.
Yeah.
Now that when I hear you on the phone for some bill or something, and you're like, it's Audrey Hussey, I really like it.
Yeah, it's like being a team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, I hope everyone out there is doing great today. We have not done a podcast like this in a little while. I mean, it must have been 2 months, maybe. We obviously have been releasing, you know, podcasts, but in this format where we get together and we have a conversation, it just hasn't happened like this in a while. We went to Sicily to get married. We went to Japan for a month on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
And that was incredible. And we didn't do any recording of any kind, which I'm not going to lie, felt amazing. And we came back all revved up. We've been very excited to come back and speak to everyone, make videos, make podcasts. And I think we're just so revved up for 2024 now, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So now that we're back, we thought, what shall we talk about? One of the things that we're going to be talking about a little more in the coming months is what's going on out there with people struggling to get what they want in a relationship with someone who is just not committing, not willing to just say, yes, we're in an exclusive relationship. Or it might even be someone who you're with in an exclusive relationship, but it's not progressing further than that and you want it to. Maybe you want to get married and that's not happening. What's going on out there that so many people are struggling? And you made a really interesting point, I think it was yesterday, where you basically said, just there's such a lack of belief out there now, especially among women, that people even want commitment. Like just as a foundational thing, there's just a big idea that no one wants it anymore.
Yeah, I think the sort of resentment, is that a word in English? Ressenti in French? Resentment? No, it's not.
Sentiment.
The sentiment. Yeah, the feeling out there, I suppose, is I think that, you know, you can maybe get on a date, you can maybe get on a second date, you can maybe even get to a situation where you're regularly seeing someone. You might even get into a situation where you're seeing them more than regularly and actually you're kind of almost in a relationship, but actually crossing that threshold of being in a relationship and having someone say, yes, let's just try it, you and me, feels more and more scarce. And I think people, certainly, you know, in our Love Life community, we talk to so many people who are just, you know, the kind of belief is men don't want to commit. I'm sure, for men out there, there is also a belief that a lot of women don't want to commit, but we obviously talk to a lot of women, so that's kind of where that's coming from. But yeah, like almost as if all of this abundance of choice in dating apps, social media, the curated images, the whatever, and the illusion of having all this choice has led to, a kind of generation of men who just never ever want to take that plunge because they're just loving playing the field too much. So yeah, I definitely think that's what a lot of people are feeling right now. Like, how do I actually cross over into that next stage?
It's interesting. I said this to you when you said that. I was like, when I think of our friend Lewis Howes, he is someone who's now in a long-term relationship where he's engaged
To the best person
ever. And he's someone who's out there talking a lot. He has a big audience of men, and he's talking a lot about how he's found a much more peaceful, happy existence because of the relationship he's in. I would say he's a big, I don't know if evangelist is the right word, but he's a huge proponent of finding a relationship. And, I feel like Lewis is a very type A, ambitious person. He's all about, creating this great life. When people like him are saying relationships are awesome, and there's lots of men listening, to me, I feel like that's a positive sign that men aren't just getting messages that they should play the field. They're not just getting messages that, if you're a guy who's handsome and successful and you've got a good life and you should just wait as long as you possibly can to settle down. I feel like there's a lot of messages in the other direction now. I mean, even when you hear like people like Jordan Peterson who have huge male followings, I think Jameson, isn't Jordan Peterson like the sooner you have kids, the better? Like he seems to be, I'm not suggesting he's saying like have kids at 21, but he certainly is feeding the message to a generation of men that, hey, you wait too long because this is the greatest thing ever and you should do it sooner. When I see that, I don't see there being just one message out there for men that is just go play the field, sow your oats, do that whole thing. There will definitely be a lot of guys saying that, but I feel like there's a lot of male thought leaders right now who are encouraging something different. And I at the very least, I think that could be a bit of a pressure valve for women who think that there's no, the world's just gone in a direction of no commitment. I don't know this statistically, but empirically from what I'm looking at, it almost feels like there is just a slight turning of a corner a little bit that's happening in the way that people are viewing all of that. And it might just be that I'm watching more content that is for 30 somethings and up these days. Maybe there's still, I think for, men in their 20s still represent a dangerous proposition, I think, because I think that it takes a lot of guys, most of their 20s, to even get to a place where they start thinking seriously about a relationship or have the maturity to have a real relationship, as opposed to a relationship that's just founded on desire or attraction, but is actually founded on mutual care and empathy and responsibility and teamwork. So I do think that there might be, I'm watching certain not older, but, I'm watching people above the age of 30 who are saying these things.
So I have a question for you. I think a rhetoric we hear often, which I actually happen to agree with, is when it comes to men and commitment, it's all about timing. We talk about men having their light on, and when their light goes on, they just commit to the nearest. There's this theory.
I've never heard it put like that.
Yeah, it's like a very commonly way. Yeah, like men have a light, and once their light is on, they'll commit to the nearest person to them. There's almost this kind of idea that like, oh, it's not about the people, it's about just them being ready. And I find that to be very interesting because to me, everything you're talking about isn't untrue. There is absolutely a huge contingent of people who are kind of saying that obviously, relationships bring you more peace, bring you more joy, make you more successful. You live a longer life and all the rest of it. And obviously, if you want a family, you need to find a partner to do that with. So there are definitely a lot of men who are talking about that. But there is still, I think, from, again, just going back to our Love Life community and all the women that we coach, there is, I think, a huge sort of group of men out there, probably in their 20s, but also in their 30s, I would say, who, still are very hesitant around committing, right? And this idea of like maybe, having your light on, it might be that people after the fact who have found commitment, who have found the beauty of commitment, might then go, oh, you should do it, absolutely. But how do you actually get someone there? Because I think the timing thing is interesting. There is definitely a lot to be said for, in your 20s. I mean, I think men and women, you think you're ready, you're not ready at all. You don't know who you are. You don't really know what you want. Some people do, don't get me wrong. Some people find beautiful, lasting relationships in their 20s. But for the most part, my experience, my personal experience and my experience of people around me is that in your 20s, you're just figuring it out. But I think sometimes there is this hangover where women kind of have figured it out. They know what they want in their 30s, but men are catching up a little bit. And so I want to ask you, in terms of this idea of being ready and having your light on, like, what do you think makes that, what do you think kind of precipitates that feeling of being ready for men?
I think so much of it is peer group. Because it's easy to say, like, a man hits a certain point in his life where he's, starts feeling less fulfilled, and he starts realizing that the single life isn't working for him and whatever. And in a sense, I think that there's truth to that. It's not that that's not an element. I think a lot of guys get to a point, you have different things going on. You have some guys who struggle when they're single and they really struggle to meet people and attract people. And in a sense, they never really have that that Jim Carrey thing of Jim Carrey saying, I wish everyone could get rich and famous so that they could realize it doesn't work. I think there's an element of that in people's love lives where there are certain guys who never really experience feeling successful single. And so they never realize that it doesn't work, even if the thing they would want to happen happened. Even if they could get anyone they wanted, have as much sex as they wanted, date as many people as they wanted, date the person they think is the hottest person, it still wouldn't, quote, work. It wouldn't solve all of their emotional issues in life. And so I think there are guys who kind of, in some ways, maybe struggle to commit because they never really fulfill what they thought they wanted to fulfill in their single lives. And there are other guys who maybe do on some level, at least enough to see that, oh, wow, it didn't work. This is not going to sustain me. This is not going to be enough. This is not the kind of existence I want to have. And then they start looking for commitment. So I'm not saying that some of those things don't happen naturally, but I also just think so much of life is your peer group. It's who you spend time with. It's who your mentors are. If you are around people who are, if you join a jiu-jitsu gym, you are going to start wanting to be more healthy because, and James Clear talks about this. James Clear is the habit guy. He talks about this idea that you should join community. If you want to inculcate a habit, you should join communities who take those values seriously, because you will want to start having those habits just to keep pace with that community. So for me, I know that eating healthy and being fit and strong in the gym is actually downstream from me going to jiu-jitsu. Because when I go to jiu-jitsu, it's so evident so quickly if I'm out of sync in my values with the people there, because I either can't keep up or because I don't relate to the things they're talking about or the ways that they're living. Or so my values change because of the peer group I'm around, or they shift a little. And that, I believe, happens among men in their peer groups. Who are they spending time with? You know, I noticed for myself, I'd be lying if I didn't say I noticed a shift when I started, you know, in the last few years of my life, spending more time with guys who were a little bit older in many cases. And not all of them, actually. Not all of them older, but just guys who were living a life where they were in very committed relationships, either married, had kids, and they would talk very, very positively about that life. And I would see them I would ask them questions and see them achieving just as much as I was, if not more. And it would kind of rob me of certain excuses that I had, like, oh, if I'm in a relationship, I'm not going to achieve as much. It's going to slow me down. I'm going to have too many things to manage. I'm not going to be able to be as focused. And I saw, you know, I met guys who made me realize that that was this assumption I was making that wasn't true. That they, you know, in some cases had several kids, 4 or 5 kids, and were more productive than I was.
But I have a question, because when you and I met, you weren't putting yourself around those people. It was more when we were together and we were kind of already in a committed relationship that you started to develop your love and value for that through that peer group. Whereas before that, I would argue most of your friends were actually single when you and I met. So how do you explain that? Because to me, that suggests that there was already something about that life that wasn't working for you. And then an outside influence of meeting somebody kind of convinced you, so to speak, to go, oh, I'm going to give this a shot. I being the outside entity in that instance. And the reason I'm lingering on this is that I can imagine people listening going, you know, well, that's all well and good, but what if I don't have someone who's curious? And what if I don't have someone who has friends who have relationships or kids or married and, you know, want marriage? Yeah. What if I am just always meeting guys who are Peter Pan and all their friends are the Lost Boys? What then? And I think there's actually, I agree with everything you said, but I almost think there is also a lot that you can do to kind of point someone in the direction of being even interested and curious about the subject of commitment. I'd love you to speak to that.
Well, I think that it's a great point. I think if the person you're with has friends who are like out every night till 3 a.m. and they're dragging him out with them and they're very much in single mode and he's really tight with them, like there's a natural obstacle because
the bros,
that's his peer group right now. Like when you met me, that wasn't my peer group. I was still getting to know other people who were further ahead, you know, further along in their personal lives than I was. And you're right, some of those relationships have become deeper in the time that we've known each other.
You were not in a single phase. You had evolved past a, like, you know, I'm loving being single and going out and all that.
No, I was actually starting to feel like it really wasn't enjoyable. And that wasn't coming from a place of not liking my own company. I really liked my own company. I'd learned in that time to like my own company.
Yeah, he loves his own company. Everybody listening, I've never met a man who loves his own company more. He gets very excited when I leave the house. I have to not take offense to this.
But I actually, I mean, this is a separate point, but one of the things that I really enjoy about our relationship is that you don't get offended by me needing that. Like
no, not at all,
you've come to really understand that it has nothing to do with you, that I really enjoy my own company.
Yeah, you need to recharge once in a while on your own, and it's
But that's a good example of something that made me less afraid of commitment.
Interesting. What do you mean?
Well, if someone had come along and not understood that about me, it might have made me feel quite scared or suffocated, because I might have felt like, wow, we don't live the same life as many of our parents. My mum and dad, when I was growing up, my dad was out all day. They weren't in a house remote working together, like in the kitchen together on every break, and sometimes working next to each other on the sofa for hours on end. Or that was not my mum and dad's life. They didn't see each other most of the day. And then my dad would come home at the end of the night. Like, I'm not saying that was the healthiest version of life either, but it's also the other extreme can be just as dangerous, where you're now a couple who's in a house together or an apartment. You potentially are both working from home, and now there's no separation unless you create it. That's not conducive to getting the space that two people often need. So, and some people need more space than others, and people vary in that respect, but it's healthy for a relationship nonetheless. I think it's been one of the things that's been a great thing for our relationship, is that and to be fair, you've come to understand this because our relationship has proven to be safe, right? If I was asking for space all the time, and on top of it, our relationship felt like it was on really shaky ground and it wasn't safe, and it didn't feel like there was commitment there, that may be, that would then maybe be taken with a different meaning. But I think because there was a sense of safety and progression in the relationship, you were able to your credit, see that, oh, this is just something that this person needs. This is something that's important to him. And as a result, it allows, I think we're always future projecting, right? Like Elaine de Botton talked about this. Like, anytime a person does something that upsets you or freaks you out, one of the reasons it upsets you so much, one of the reasons it freaks you out so much, is because you're future projecting. You're looking at that thing they're doing today and extrapolating out to the entire future of your life, going, oh my God, this is something I'm going to have to deal with forever in 1,000 different situations. And so you've upset me today turns into you've ruined my entire life.
Yeah.
And I really understand and relate to that. I realized, and this was on me too, by the way, to be brave enough to ask for what I wanted. But when I realized I could ask you or say to you, or even not even ask sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say, you never ever asked me.
But I think that's because
space.
you've made lots of friends.
Oh.
So you give me space naturally.
Right.
Like
right.
I didn't need to, in a sense.
But
because
in the beginning as well, and I suppose I want you to finish your point, but the reason I'm sort of highlighting,
I feel like we're off on a tangent here from the thing you asked, but I do think this is really important. So I do kind of want to stay with this for a second.
The reason I'm sort of stipulating that I know you never asked for it goes back to this idea of like, how do you actually make an impact when you would like to influence someone into committing to you? And I think that the impact is made through really understanding and seeing the person in front of you and analyzing what their needs might be and almost getting out in front of them. Because I think if you'd asked me for space, that would insinuate that I had not given you enough space, that you already felt suffocated. And where that's great, and obviously some people might get to do that and still come out very strong, I think there is a superpower in being able to read people and say, oh, they've mentioned they're introverted. They've mentioned they like alone time. I can see that they'll spend a whole weekend on their own without seeing anyone. Therefore, I am going to do the maths in my head and conclude that this person probably needs a little bit of space. So instead of waiting for them to come to me and asking for it, I'm going to offer that space so they don't feel like they have to ask for it and they feel like they're very seen and understood in that moment. And I'm using this as an example, but the reason I'm highlighting it is I think there's something to that, and there is a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I think that's really, really, that's such a great point. Such a great point. And sometimes if you don't know, like that suggests in a sense, what you just said suggests you're able to read a situation, you're able to interpret what someone needs. even if you feel like you can't right now, just coming to someone periodically and saying, is there anything you want more of that you don't get in our relationship?
Yeah.
Or is there anything you wish I'd do more? Is there anything you wish I'd do less? Is there anything you feel like you need that you're not getting?
For sure.
Anything important to you that you feel like you maybe haven't asked for? I think just saying those things can sometimes give someone the permission to be like, well, actually, I suppose one thing that I would like is this. And then being brave enough to hear the answer, because that's creating that safety for someone to say those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then not coming down on someone for the answer, but instead being like, okay, well, you know, how might that look, or what might we do to create that for you?
And the way to not take it personally, I think, is to realize that the reason you asked is because you're trying to strengthen the relationship. And so any information you get that is feedback is a way of strengthening the relationship. Now, if what they're giving you as feedback is rude, disrespectful, unrealistic, negates your needs and what you need in a relationship. If they say, I want to sleep in separate bedrooms, but for you, sleeping together is really important, for instance, then those are things that you have to almost check in with yourself and ask yourself whether or not you want to put up with this and whether that's the right relationship for you. But any feedback that's like, actually, you know, sometimes you talk too much. I'm laughing because I think sometimes I talk too much. But, you know, sometimes you talk too much and I really like to be silent and just have quiet time. You can take that feedback and think to yourself, oh, like, they're not saying I don't want to be with you because you talk too much. They're just saying, if I was to optimize this relationship, this is a way I would optimize it. The same way you might say, you know, I love it when you hug me. So when we're watching movies, I sometimes feel like you're a bit far away and I'd love for you to hug me. It doesn't mean you don't want to spend time with them if they don't do that. It just means that that would be a way to make you feel extra special and extra loved. So that's the way to almost spin it in your head if you feel yourself getting that, you know, defensive kind of, you know, ball in your throat feeling of, oh my God, they're criticizing the way that I am in a relationship or our relationship as it stands. Instead going, oh, no, this is just an opportunity for me to strengthen this connection. And a commitment and a lasting connection has to be very, very strong. So it is only going to be forged through difficult conversations and feedback and adjusting and changing and adapting for each other.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the more you do that with someone, the more the relationship is going to become something that the other person doesn't want to lose.
Yeah.
Because they'll feel like you have the unique key to them.
That's so true.
You created the key that no one else has through your understanding of them. And they're like, I don't want to lose this key. This person knows how to unlock me. This person knows how to like make me happy. This person understands how to uniquely support me.
This person wants to make me happy.
Wants to, yeah, well, that's a big one, that they actually are trying to be the best teammate they can be. While you're here, I wanted to share something with you. I am going to be working with an exclusive group of people in 2024 in person for 6 days on my live retreat. It's going to be in September. It's going to be in Florida. It's going to be an incredible event for anyone who wants to do the deeper work of what's holding them back in love and in their life. Come join us by going to mhretreat.com and I'll tell you all about it. I want to go back to that because you basically said when a guy doesn't have those influences yet, what
exactly.
can you do?
How can you
And I think we're
influence?
talking about it. I think this is it, because you can, you know, people get influenced in all sorts of different ways. Sometimes they get influenced because they find themselves around a lot more, you know, married people or people with kids, people with happy relationships, and they're guys that they respect.
Yeah.
And when a guy that you really respect tells you like, no, this is where it's at, like having an amazing relationship, man. And especially if they frame it in terms that speak to you at that time in your life, like if you speak to a type A guy and you're like, no, you don't understand. You're going to achieve more in a relationship. That's music to your ears if you're that kind of guy in that time in your life, because you're like, oh, I've been telling myself this is at odds with those things. And actually that's that's a mistaken assumption. I've been listening to the wrong people in life. So yes, that's one way to influence, is to be around different peer groups. But if a guy doesn't have that, or if a person doesn't have that, you are also a very strong influence on them by showing them how great a relationship can be.
Yeah.
You can model how great a relationship can be, even before you're in a relationship with someone.
How do you do that?
I think it's lots of different ways. It's like, you know, anticipating that someone might need a little space can be done in dating. If you feel like you've been with someone for like, you know, day after day after day, and you're like, you know what, it seems to me like this is probably, you know, a time where they might want to see their friends at this stage, or there might be gym classes they're missing out on because we've been nesting for the last 2 weeks, or there might be things that are starting to affect their life, the rhythm of their life. Then I think you can point those things out, because dating, the romance is like a sprint. And in a sprint, you're just going hard until you run out of steam. You can't sprint forever. A relationship is a marathon. And so it's about sustainability. Can you sustain this pace over 100 miles? And when you're nesting with someone for 2 weeks, just to stick with this example, there are many, but to stick with this one, when you're nesting with someone for 2 weeks because it just feels so good, you're also going at a pace and a rhythm that neither of you can really sustain in your life. You're both missing things. There are responsibilities not being tended to.
It's that mood, right? You said this before, where you were like, when you're falling in love and you're just like, I don't need anything else.
Nothing.
I just need you.
Yeah. This is all I need. I don't ever need to do anything again.
I don't need to see my family, my friends. I don't need to exercise. I don't need to work. I don't need to sleep.
Because you're on drugs. That's what it is. You're on drugs. And you're like, this is the only thing I need from now on. But gradually, life starts to fall apart a little bit, or, you miss a deadline at work, and that's like a alarm bell in your head. Like that I'm not being responsible here. You've got 5 texts from your brother, your mother, your sister, your best friend that are unanswered. At a certain point, a relationship is saying yes to something that actually beats with the rhythm of your life. And you go, I could keep going. This actually enhances everything. It makes everything better. So, you don't have to, it's not your job to anticipate everything that someone's not telling you. And I kind of think for me, one of the problems I've had most of my life, one of the challenges is not asking for what I need, not asking for what I want. Like being afraid that if I were to ask for space, that someone would abandon me, that someone would, they would get angry, or they would get upset, or they would, something bad would happen. It was like my nervous system deep down, I might really want, this is interesting. It's like super paradoxical, but this feeling of I need space, but I'm afraid to ask for space because I don't want to lose connection.
That makes complete sense. I think a lot of people feel that.
Right.
It's very not anxious avoidant, but it's very anxious by nature in terms of attachment, because you almost don't trust a relationship to continue on its track.
Yes, but it doesn't fall into the normal kind of...
It's a control thing.
It's a control thing, but it doesn't fall into that. We often associate anxious attachment with clinging on to someone, not needing space. And in a sense, it's still a form of clinging, because you're basically saying my needs are telling me I need space, but I'm afraid to ask for it because I'm afraid that the relationship is going to be harmed by me asking for it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an old wound, right? That's old stuff in my life that's appearing in new situations over and over and over again.
For sure.
With
Yeah.
people that, with you, I could do that and nothing bad would happen.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't mean that night you'd be like, well, screw you then. I'm going to go out and party and flirt with guys because you
Yeah, I'm
don't want
gonna
to
go to
hang
the
out with
club.
me. Like that wasn't the reality of our relationship. It wasn't, something bad wasn't going to happen because I asked for that. But I still didn't know how to ask for that early on in our relationship. And by the way, I'm still getting better at this. I'm not all the way there, but I'm learning bit by bit that it's safe to say these things and to ask for these things because, this relationship has modeled for me a different kind of safety. And that bad things don't happen. You get these new reference points for, oh, a bad thing didn't happen when I did that.
Yeah.
I can do more of it. And again, it sounds silly, but when we joke about, we have all these in jokes when you go out for a night with your friends about how much I'm going to enjoy it instead of missing you. Those jokes actually are a great pressure valve for me because they say, oh, it's safe to be who I really am.
I just picture you like, I leave the house, the door closes, and it's literally like, yeah, and then you're jumping on the bed, you're eating popcorn.
It's like I hit a button and like Disco Stu's house in The Simpsons where he's got a date coming over and he hits a button and all of these different, like the record goes on and the bed turns into a love bed. And I think it's Disco Stu. Or maybe it's not Disco Stu. Maybe it's Quagmire from Family Guy.
It is Quagmire.
It's Quagmire from Family Guy.
Yeah,
very similar characters. It's like that, except it just turns into like a very innocent place where I get to just watch whatever I want to watch.
Or so he says. But no, I really love everything you're saying.
But I suppose my point is that I early on, it was my responsibility, and I don't want to take this responsibility off of the person whose responsibility it should be. It was my responsibility to come to a relationship more healed than I did, and to come to a relationship being able to ask for those things. And I think we do a lot of blaming other people for things that we ourselves haven't learned how to ask for.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we go, oh, they suffocated me. The number of relationships that I probably, decided somebody else was the problem, where really I didn't ask for what I wanted. I didn't actually say what would have made me happier. I didn't have the guts to. I was too afraid. That, we constantly blame other people for these things. So on one hand, I think be aware that I'm not saying when you go to someone, it's your job to heal them and to do that work for them. That I was behind there. And that made me someone who was a little more dangerous to date in some ways because I hadn't done that. But what you can do that I think helps someone heal and helps someone bring forward their core, a more authentic version of themselves, is you can ask those questions that we were talking about. You can get to know them and ask them what they need. And you can start to just feel your way around those things. And when you do, what they're going to realize is that they get to be a more authentic version of themselves with you than they ever have been before. And when you find someone that you feel you can be a truly authentic version of yourself with, and they accept that, and they make you feel safe for that, that's a very, very hard thing to give up.
Yeah. What I think is really, really, so much is really interesting about this, but one of the things I think is super interesting is it goes back to that idea of men and their light and men being ready, right? We're using you as an example, but I think this is applicable to a lot of people and a lot of men out there. You either needed, in your case, to go and sort out all those things you're speaking about and then meet someone where you could communicate those things, or you needed to meet someone who was able to have those kinds of communication pattern with you and was able to ask you those questions, which then made you ready. So that's what's interesting. And that's where I really hope everyone listening is kind of realizing they have more power than they realize, because this is just one thing, right? There's many other things, but this is one thing that can kind of tip someone over the edge from being not ready to ready. Now, I want to just say something before I continue, because I feel like we have been doing a lot of kind of talking about endorsing how you can influence someone into being in a relationship with you. What I don't want this to come across as is, that you can change somebody's mind if they're A, really not ready, or B, just not taking the situation seriously. There are plenty of people who are going to be more than willing to waste your time, take everything you give them, and never ever give you what you want. And there is no amount of asking questions and what they need and preempting and second guessing things for them and giving them space. None of that is going to make a difference, because they're just not there. So I think all of this has to be met with an incredibly healthy set of standards for yourself, which is, here is what I want. And if this person is not able to meet that need within that time frame, I'm out. Not in an abrasive way, not in an angry way, just in a way where you go, I like you, but I like me more. And so I really want that point to be made.
I think, well, what you're saying and how to find that balance between showing up as your best, getting the best out of them, but also having standards that protect you from going too far down the road with someone who is not going to change and not going to budge, and their belief systems are not malleable in this area. That is the subject of an event that we are doing on January the 23rd called the First Principles of Getting Commitment. And this is a free event, so everyone should come to this. It's virtual, so you can watch it anywhere in the world, but it is going to be the distilled wisdom of many years of helping people to make better choices in their love lives when it comes to commitment. And yes, learn how to influence situations, but also to learn what's the difference between a situation you should walk away from and one that actually still has real potential. These principles that you learn on this event are going to be principles that you're going to take with you over and over again in so many situations. And for everyone who wants to come, go to lovelifetraining.com and sign up right now. We've got thousands of people who are going to be joining us for this from all over the world. And it's a one-time event. This is not about to be repeated. It's a very special moment. I even have a very special surprise on that event that I'm not going to tell you about. I just show up. I promise you. I promise you, if you don't show up to this, there is something major that you're going to miss out on. So make sure you come and bring a pen and paper, because you're going to be making lots of notes, and it really is going to be a must for people who are serious about finding commitment this year. So that's on the 23rd of January. Go to lovelifetraining.com to sign up right now. Thank you everyone for listening to this episode. We look forward to joining you again in the next one. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
As always, thank you for listening to the Love Life podcast.
Take care, everybody.